Olaudah Equiano has been revered in history as one of the most influential abolitionist figures. Once an African slave, Equiano went on quite a journey throughout his life. His story, published in his autobiography in 1789, was read by millions and captured the fascination of the British public. Olaudah Equiano was an enslaved man who bought his freedom and wrote about his experiences in a compelling manner. He was an extraordinary man who became a prominent figure associated with the campaign to abolish slave trade. Olaudah Equiano was born in Nigeria in the year 1745. Equiano recounted an incident of an attempted kidnapping of children in his Igbo village, which was foiled by adults. When he was around the age of 11, he and his sister were left alone to look after their family premises, as was common when adults went out of the house to work. They were both kidnapped and taken far from their hometown, separated and sold to slave traders. He tried to escape but was thwarted. After his owners changed several times, Equiano happened to meet with his sister, but unfortunately, they were separated again. 6 or 7 months after he had been kidnapped, he arrived at the coast where he was taken on board a European slave ship. He was transported with 244 other enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to Barbados in the British West Indies. He and a few other slaves were sent on for sale in the colony of Virginia. In Virginia, Equiano was bought by Michael Henry Pascal, a lieutenant in the Royal Navy. Pascal renamed the boy Gustavus Vasa after the 16th century king of Sweden, Gustav Vasa, who began the Protestant Reformation in Sweden. Equiano had already been renamed twice. He was called Michael while on board the slave ship that brought him to the Americas, and Jacob by his first owner. This time, Equiano refused and told his new owner that he would prefer to be called Jacob. His refusal, he says, gained me many a cough. And eventually, he submitted to the new name. He had used this name for the rest of his life, including on all official records. He had only used Equiano in his autobiography, which you will hear now. Pascal, Equiano's master, took a liking to Equiano and had his sister-in-law in Britain take him in and teach him English. He received an education and was baptized as a Christian in 1759. It was extremely rare for a former slave to be well-read and literate in the late 18th century. Having traveled for roughly 8 years with Pascal, Equiano was eventually resold to a Quaker merchant named Robert King. Equiano was trusted with a position of responsibility, trading goods for kings around the West Indies and North America. This role enabled Equiano to save up some additional income. Over 3 years while working for King, Equiano saved over $40, which was more than enough to buy his own personal freedom. He did so in 1766. The interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, Gustavus Vasa, the African, was first published in 1789 in London. This book happens to be the autobiography of Olaudah Equiano, written by Olaudah Equiano himself. The narrative is argued to represent a variety of styles, such as slavery narrative, travel narrative, and spiritual narrative. The book describes Equiano's time spent in enslavement and documents his attempts at becoming an independent man through the study of the Bible and his eventual success in gaining his own freedom and in business thereafter. This book was the first slave narrative to become an international seller. The book skillfully traced Equiano's career from childhood in West Africa through the dreadful transatlantic Middle Passage to eventual freedom and economic success as a British citizen. He sold the book throughout Britain, undertaking lecture tours and actively campaigning to abolish the slave trade. The book is one of the most famous black autobiographies of the time. In 1872, Equiano married an English woman, Susanna Collin, and they had two children.